So your sewing machine's not working and you bring it to the shop to ask somebody like me, why is it not working? G'day, I'm Sharon, welcome to my channel. So I'm about to go through the process that I would go through if you bring your machine to me and it's not working. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rethread your machine with my thread. I'll probably use a different coloured thread on the bobbin to the top so that I can see what's going on with tension. But mostly what I want to do is put some good quality thread in there to make sure that the problem is actually the machine and not something you're doing with it. I can always teach you how to thread your machine when I'm finished, but there's no point starting there because it might actually be an issue with the machine. So why did I choose to put my own thread in there? Well, you might be using something that's not actually helping the machine to work. This thread here is by King Tut. It's a quilting thread. It's 100% cotton. It's intended for sewing machines and it's beautiful. This is a Gutermann 100% cotton thread that is intended for sewing machines and it is also beautiful. I use it for quilting quite regularly. This is also a Gutermann thread. It is a good quality thread. If you have a look around the top of it, it actually says quilting. So you would think that would be good for quilting. However, it's a hand quilting thread and sewing machines just don't like it. So here are the different kinds of thread up close. You can see that this one says Gutermann quilting 200 meters. And down here, they're giving things that say 100% cotton. They're the ones that don't work and they feel sort of like they've done something to them to be equivalent to putting beeswax on the thread, which is what you do with hand quilting thread. This one similarly says it's 100% cotton. It doesn't say quilting anywhere on it, but that one's fine in your sewing machine. So it's really weird things to look out for because there's nothing about that that seems to say hand quilting. And this one, 100% cotton, is for using in your sewing machine. So if you came into my store and you had a thread like this in, when I change to proper sewing machine threads, the machine is going to be able to work. It won't work with this stuff. There's actually a very high chance, probably about 90%, that after I have rethreaded the machine and put good thread in it, it'll probably work. It's often that easy. The remaining 10% I have to go a little bit further into. Now, the next thing I would look at is the needle. And as my technician says, needles will be 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th on this list. People often don't realise that needles have about an 8 to 10 hour lifespan, and that's 8 to 10 hours of sewing. If you looked at the point of a needle after 8 or 10 hours of sewing, it's a jagged mess, and it's making a mess of your fabric as you're sewing with it. You may be able to hear when you're sewing the needle either punching into the fabric, or sometimes you can hear like a tick tick because it's got a bit of a hook on the end of it, and as it's coming back up out of the fabric, it's actually pulling on the threads. Change your needle more often. Most fairly modern sewing machines have a particular kind of needle that they need to use, and the length of the needle, the distance between the point and the eye of the needle, and the distance between the eye and the top of the needle are very exacting measurements. If you put a needle in that's wrong for your machine, the machine won't work. If you put in the wrong kind of needle for your fabric, that will have a bad effect too. If we've got this far and the machine's still not working, I'm probably going to replace the needle with a number 12, which is a sort of a middle of the road needle. It's also a number 80, and just use 2 layers of cotton fabric and test it. However, if you've brought me a cover stitch machine, then I'm not going to be using one of these needles. You might be, but I'm not going to. If you've brought me a cover stitch machine, I want to use EL needles because the machines need a different kind of needle. These are some of the things you need to know about your machine. Cover stitch, probably EL. Overlockers and serges, at least with the Janome ones, it's a ballpoint. On the machine it actually says HA1SP, and that means a ballpoint needle. Even if you're sewing a woven fabric, it's still a ballpoint needle you're supposed to use. If your machine is a bit more specialist, perhaps it's a high-speed straight stitch only machine that you use for quilting or something like that, maybe you need to use a HL/5 needle. It's actually important to make sure you're using the right needle for your machine. They are different. These are the needles that I need for my Janome 4-needle embroidery machine. These ones have actually got a rounded head on them, so the rounded shaft at the top fits in differently to the machine. I have seen somebody put these into a machine backwards. Machine definitely doesn't work with the machines in backwards. Another thing that can cause difficulties for your machine is if there's been some damage to your bobbin case. Sometimes things happen, these move around how they shouldn't in the machine, and you end up with deep gouges in the bottom of them, and then the machine won't sew. So one of the other things, if I'm at this point and I'm still having trouble with the machine, I'm going to have a look at that bobbin case and make sure there's no damage to it. We're still looking at things that I can potentially solve myself, but we've looked at thread, needles, threading, and bobbin cases. It's quite a few things to look at, still without needing a tech. If I've got to this point and the machine is just not picking up the bobbin thread at all, it's probably beyond me and above my pay grade, and it needs to go to a technician, because the chances are that there's a timing issue. And most often this will happen if you've been sewing and you've gone over something and the fabric has gone down into the machine and everything's got knotted up and stuck. At that point, you may have actually misaligned where the needle is compared to where the hook is. And that's what we call a timing issue. So when the needle comes down and throws its loop, that is not the time that the hook's going past. So it needs to go to a technician to get it sorted out. So what are the top 5 reasons why your machine's not sewing properly? Number 1, it's not threaded properly. Number 2, you've got a problem with your thread. Use good quality thread. Number 3, there's a problem with your needle. It either is bent or broken or doesn't match the fabric or the machine that it's being used in. Number 4, there's something happened to your bobbin case. And number 5, it needs to see a technician because there is actually a timing issue. And when they do a service, they'll sort that out. Bonus tip. If when you're sewing the machine is working but the top tension is loose and the thread is going down and being loose underneath, you can see it underneath. And if you've tried changing the tension and it hasn't actually altered anything, try this. Get a piece of fabric, fold it, and use that fold to go through the tension discs where the thread goes. Because sometimes there's a little piece of thread that's got stuck in that tension disc and it's holding it open. And maybe that's all you need to do to sort out your tension issue. Hope that helps. See you next time.